1984 would be the first time I ever went to Cliffside.
Uh-huh.
And then I went for several subsequent years to take Eric's classes, and I ended up as one of his teaching assistants.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which was a lot of fun, and that was kind of the first place I ever really saw Danish technology. Was in Eric's collections, and I knew he was working on it. And, that was really my first exposure to Francois Boards and Jacques Pellegrin and Peter Kelterborn and Bo Madsen and all the international types that Eric ran with.
Uh-huh.
So those were awesome years for me. I mean, I spent hours and hours and hours going over Eric's collections and his library, and in exchange for being a teaching assistant for Eric, he ended up working with me privately for several days after each session.
Uh-huh.
And it was just that was a great period in my life. But I'm from a little hick farming town in West Michigan called Greenville, and I got interested in flint knapping originally. We have a little natural history, local history museum in Greenville, and my mom would take me to the talks and to the museum, and I was always fascinated with arrowheads and kind of the Native American history of Michigan. And then when I was about 10 years old, she took me to a talk. A guy came and he chipped a arrow point out of the bottom of a bottle with a copper nail. And I wanted to hunt arrowheads, and I saw this and thought, well, heck, I can make all the arrowheads I would ever want. I don't even have to find them.
Uh-huh.
And so I started to tinker with it when I was 10. I'm 55 this fall.
Uh-huh.
So that's a long time ago, and I stuck with it, and for a long time thought I was only one of a handful of flint workers out there, and then I met Eric, and I at that point I was just starting college in Central Michigan at Alma College, and then I met Mike Cook, who's flint napper of some renown, who lives only about 40 minutes from me.
Uh-huh.
Started to hang out with Mike, and he was going out to Callahan's classes, and it just kind of snowballed.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I decided I wanted to do a degree in archaeology. So I did one at Alma College, and flint napping all the while, and my ability to understand the lithics we found. Central Michigan is not spectacular, but there's a lot of large collections. It was a very helpful component, and then I graduated in '87 and ended up at the University of Wyoming with George Frizen doing paleo Indian stuff, and still flint napping, and that was really the window when I got interested in the more modern flint napping world. I learned about, at that time Fort Osage was really a big deal, and Don Kyleberg, J.B. Sahlberger was still alive down in Texas, and I'd go down to Don's gatherings at his home near Killeen, and did that all from Wyoming. I met Bruce Bradley for the first time in Cheyenne, Wyoming, when Bruce came up to do a demonstration. And I wrote a dissertation on a master's thesis on a paleo Indian site at Sunrise, Wyoming, that was all busted up paleo points of different varieties, and I needed a way to put myself through graduate school, so I started making custom knives with stone blades. Had a little company called the Prehistoric Edge, and I joined the Knife Makers Guild, and I made my living and paid my apartment and tuition by selling stone knives back in the late '80s. And there weren't a lot of there's a ton of steel knife collectors who were into the custom market, but no one at that time was making stone blades, and I was, and I about fell over when I realized, one year in about 1989, I think I made $20,000 or $22,000 just on making knives.
Wow!
And it, paid my living, and it was a great life. And drove out to Glass Buttes to collect rock, and still remember stacking 1,000 pounds of obsidian on my balcony of the little apartment I had. Get yelled at by the landlord because it was blowing my deck out, all the weight from the rock. I rented a little studio in Laramie to Flint Knapp year round.
Oh, that's
So
neat.
those were good years, and I graduated from Wyoming with an MA and ended up at the University of Wisconsin to do a PhD, and I wanted to do lithics, and thought I was going to work in India with a professor, and I ended up having an opportunity to go to Denmark with the department chair, Doug Price. So I went for the first time in '92, and that was really an eye opener. I ended up living on and off in Denmark for a number of years and met all the Danish flintnappers, Torbjørn Petersen and Bo Madsen and Peter Vemming. There aren't a lot of them, but they were all quite accomplished doing European stuff and blades and square axes and daggers, and it kind of was a snap back to that window at Cliffside with Eric. I got to see kind of what got him all cranked up, and I ended up as a Fulbright scholar based at the Danish National Museum, so I got to had free reign of the Dagger collections at the National Museum back in the mid '90s, and that really got me interested. And anyway, moved back to the States, finished my dissertation, and graduated in '95. And I started at Cran as the archaeology curator for the museum there in February '96, and never really quit flint knapping. I made most of the nap-ins, Flint Ridge, Letchworth, Osage back when it still was there. Ended up writing a dissertation on the flint technology of early agriculture, the transition to agriculture in Scandinavia, that ended up getting published by Aarhus University Press. Kind of cooled it on the night business just because I got so busy. My wife, was married by then, and we were starting to have children. And I dropped out of napping pretty much for about 8 years. I taught it a little at the museum, but I was starting to make daggers, and I felt like I'd accomplished everything I wanted to, and I picked it up again kind of hard about 4 years ago. And I've been napping pretty steadily, at least from about, May through the end of October every year. And at this point, my interest is solely the European stuff.
Right.
Primarily Type 4s and Type 1s and square section technology. Published a couple articles in Antiquity on the production sequences of Type 4s, and then another in Journal of Archaeological Science on the production of Type 1s, and I've written a few things with John Whitaker through the years. I'm interested. I'm still interested in them academically as a pursuit, and I get a lot of relaxation and pleasure. My skills have really come along, particularly over the last 4 or 5 years, sorting out the reduction sequences of the Type 4 stuff. I worked in Danish flint. I love the Georgetown that James Abood is pouring out of his private quarry in Texas near Austin. It comes in huge pieces, and it's so consistent. It's just perfect for dagger stuff. It doesn't need any heat treatment. The reduction is pretty straightforward. But I make, I'm probably, this is as productive as I've been this season. And last season, I make about 12 or 15 pieces a year. I keep most of them. I gift a few here and there. I sell a couple. Everything signed. I don't really sell pieces done in Danish flint because I don't want them ever passed off.
Right.
I'm interested in it from the technology perspective. Mike Cook really pursues the wildest, most colorful patterned rock he can find, and
Right.
I'm just simply interested in the best materials that are appropriate for Danish work. So I work Danish, Georgetown, and Keokuk. From Craig Ratzat's a friend. He came over to Denmark with me once, and I showed him around. Actually, I owe D.C. Waldorf a huge. He's probably the biggest influence on anything I've done and learned.
Uh-huh.
You know, I met D.C. Way back in the Fort Osage days, and you know, he showed me. At that point, he let me sit and watch him and answered any question I had from start to finish on Stitch Dagger stuff. And then his wife, Valerie, DC and Val came and lived with us in Denmark in '94. And Valerie did the drawings for my dissertation, and Dave came along, and we spent 2 weeks together just flint-knapping and collecting stone. And I took him to the National Museum and got him in the collections, and you know, I have such huge respect for him because until that time, Dave had never been to Scandinavia. You know, he figured out all of his tricks based on the few originals he had access to here in the States, and then casts and pictures.
Right.
So, you know, of all of the people I know, I mean, the guy that I think is the most innovative and the most generous, willing to share anything he knew was Dave Waldorf.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, I owe Dave an enormous credit. I always try to give that between him and, you know, Callahan exposed me to it, but Waldorf really, really immersed me in it. And then I just kind of ran from there as a grad student.
Uh-huh.
But I owe those guys enormous credit, for sure.
And Jim Spears, did you ever... You must have worked with Jim Spears.
You know, I met Jim a number of times, and he was always incredibly generous with his time, and particularly, you know, helping me advance with bifacing. And, you know, like Spears, I'm pretty much an abo napper. I don't use copper batons. I don't have anything.
Hello?
Antler batons, antler punches, copper and bronze pressure flakers, which were used in prehistory. But I was very inspired watching Spears work. And I also admired Peter Kelterborn. I don't know if you ever met Peter, Ray.
No, I didn't.
Peter was a Swiss engineer. He passed away a few years ago, who unlocked kind of the Egyptian grisean knife production. And Peter traveled in Europe and looked at originals in European museums, including the British Museum. He was an engineer by training and just had real masterful abilities with problem solving. And he was part of the crew running around the Lyra Research Center when Bo Madsen was there, and Eric was there, and Jacques Pellegrin was there. But I visited Peter. He hosted my wife and I at his home outside Zurich years ago, and Jacques Pellegrin came for dinner that night. I still remember it.
Oh, wow.
Peter gifted me one of his early grisean practice proofs that he had done at Danish Flint, and Pellegrin gave me a beautiful little laurel leaf point and showed us some blade technology. But, you know, I was always struck with how generous the guys you think of that are really accomplished, that you only read about. When you meet these guys personally, how incredibly generous they were with their time and willingness to share everything they knew.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, Peter was an extraordinary example, just like Waldorf. And, you know, every one of them that I ever met was willing to show me what they were up to. So, and I try to, you know, that's kind of my philosophy. I try to do the same. I don't really do anything I'm not willing to show anybody.
Do you have any contact with some of the modern, like Ed Mosier's a dagger maker now? And...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I know Ed. We talk from time to time, and saw him at Flint Ridge last year, I guess. And I'm acquainted at least with most of the modern flint workers. The Facebook flint knapping group is really something as far as looking at what other people are doing. I'm very inspired by I've never met him personally, but a guy named Larry Ware, W-A-R-E,
right,
who makes these big fantasy blades that are, you know, he grinds them and then he's flaking the edges into just wild fantasy forms.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's pretty amazing.
You know, he's not trying to emulate anything. He's just picking it up for sheer art's sake. stake and seeing how far you can push it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm aware of that. It's pretty neat.
I find that fascinating, and the stuff he's doing absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
So I'm very taken with, I follow with some interest some of these conversations about, should guys be working off of slabs, and is working with copper boppers real napping, and frankly, it makes absolutely no difference to me. It just really depends on what your end goals are. If you're doing archaeological mapping, trying to reproduce sequences done in the past, I mean, of course you need to use the tools that were only available to the Stone Age folks.
Right.
But, now with flint napping morphing more into an art form, I mean, whatever people do and however they choose to do it is just fine by me.
Right. Even making your own lithic material, I see guys making like ghost figures in between glass and fusing it and all this other stuff. It's just fascinating what people are doing.
Oh, I agree. I mean, it's a whole new world out there when you look and see, particularly some of the younger guys. How far they're carrying the art form.
Right.
So I really appreciate that kind of work. I'm still deeply interested in folks who are doing, true replication kind of work. Greg Nunn, the stuff Greg did on Type 1s. I mean, all of his blades are ground by hand, and he's using a late Neolithic toolkit to do it, and I mean that stuff really cranks me up, and that's what I'm trying to do with the Type 4 stuff I work on.
Right.
But I like it all.
Yeah.
I really do. I so appreciate the folks that are really extending the art form.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny because when I think it was like 1969, I'd have been 9 years old, and I was at the beach with my parents, and we were hiking through the sand dunes, me and my brother, and there was a shell mound, and it was like there was chunks of chert and all this other stuff in there, and bone awls and everything. And what happened is the sand dune had blown and moved and exposed this huge archaeological site. So, we were walking through it, and we found a couple arrowheads, and back then there was no real antiquities laws or anything like this. So anyway, we picked up some of the arrowheads, and then a couple years ago, we were looking through them, and one of them was flake over grinding. It looked like flake over grinding, but it was like a porous green obsidian that looked like maybe from Mexico or something with, perfectly diagonal flaking everything. It snapped off the top and the bottom. But when I look at it now, I could swear that that's modern lapidary napping. And I found it in 1969, which, besides Richard Warren, which was much later, I don't know who would be doing something like that.
Yeah, I don't either. I have no idea.
But it looked to me like it had been some guy had done flake over grinding and broke it, and as a joke tossed it on this archaeological pile, or it was something that has traded in from Mexico and was actually old. I don't know, but it's kind of a weird thing.
I'm really interested. You talk about the history of flint napping. I'm very interested still in. We have a big collection of this type of work in our fakes area at Cranbrook. Marvin McCormick and Reinhardt. The old great ghost makers. Eric told me years and years and years ago that he actually had tracked down either McCormick or Reinhardt or both of their trailers in Texas and their debutage piles, and these guys are cranking out gray ghosts off of big fat slabs with some kind of lever devices. I find all that fascinating. It makes me smile every time I see a big gray ghost point.
Yeah, I love those things.
Brought into the museum. The sections are totally flat. They're not convex they're not grinding them. They're just taking flat slabs and jacking big, gigantic pressure flakes, again with a lever device of some kind across the faces.
Yeah, one guy said to Reinhardt, he says, "These don't look like real points," and he says, "They're not. They're Reinhardt points." So he was okay with it.
Yeah. It's part of the history of modern flintworking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's, I think it's all super interesting stuff. What else, Ray? What else do you want to talk about?
Well, I had a list of stuff, but you pretty much hit on all of it. The Waldorf and the stitching, and these are the notes I took from John Whitaker's books. But you pretty much covered everything. The only thing is like when I play it back and I write it down, I may have some more questions.
Okay, sure.
But I'm thinking of other stuff, but at this age, I can only hold so much information on my endocranial recorder.
Well, it's just fun. It's fun to talk to you because you've got the deep time perspective on kind of how napping has evolved. And because I remember all those guys, and I got to meet a lot of them, and it was probably the most. When I met Callahan in Waldorf, I mean, I thought I died and went to heaven.
Yeah, me too.
I wanted to be those guys because Callahan in particular, he knew all the famous Europeans. I mean, he met Francois Bourdes and again knew Jacques Pellegrin and had worked with him in workshops at Lyra and Kelterborn. And I mean, that really opened my eyes to the fact that there's this kind of global community out there of guys that are doing mostly archaeological sorts of pursuits, but doing it through flint napping.
Yeah.
And modern replication work, and then Callahan picking it up with his knives and picking it up where the Stone Age. I think Aaron always viewed it as picking it up where the Stone Age folks left, and
right.
Carrying it that next mile forward, sort of thing.
Well, what are your thoughts on like Theodore Orcutt?
I'm sorry, you broke up there a little, Ray. On who?
Well, what are your thoughts on Theodore Orcutt, the Kerouac master, big dance blade maker? Have you ever researched him at all?
No, I haven't. I haven't done that.
But
probably oughta.
Well, I guess it's lucky for me, but just recently I've been contacted by a lot of younger people that are into lithic technology and archaeology, just asking me different things, which is kind of fun. Because I remember when I was in college, I was seeking out Don Crabtree, Solberger, Callahan, and they were like my superheroes, like my Star Wars characters of when I was a kid. I can remember I remember I wrote a letter to Don Crabtree, and I don't know what transpired. I think he was really sick at the time, but I never got a letter back. But I did get letters back from J.B. Solberger and Eric Callahan and stuff, and even Dave Waldorf. And to me, it was like every day I'd go out to the mailbox, and if I got something, it was pure elation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like back then, they just wanted to share back then. And then later, it seemed to me later, people got a little tighter. Maybe not with so much information, but, when the nap-ins, when I first started going to nap-ins, actually there wasn't any out where I was, so I had to invent my own. But at first it was just like sharing information, and then all of a sudden one day there was a booth at one of the nap-ins. And then the next year it was all booths. And then from a circle of nappers, discussing lithic technology type items, it was all like trying to sell stuff. And for me, it kind of was like it was kind of a letdown. But I'm sure those other ones still go on. It's just that, with raising kids, and I had a career, and I have like a million other hobbies too. So I didn't really get a chance to like people like you and things that fully engulf themselves. I just really love reading about you guys and stuff, but see, I just never had the time. I mean, I guess I could have made the time, but like my dad was like, he liked to do woodwork and hunting, and my brother and my other family members and stuff. So I just kind of as much as I could, I would soak it up. But I never really, I loved hobby napping, and I still do it. But to the people who live the lithics, like Bruce Bradley was my hero, George Frism, the guys that did the Odyssey program and Nova. To me, that was like other people were, into the rock and roll music. I was into the rocks without the music.
Yeah, I was the same. I mean, I remember Ray, back right when probably 1990, I learned about, I knew of Crabtree from Callahan's, and because Aaron had a couple, I think they were eccentrics that Crabtree had done.
Uh-huh.
And it was getting back in the window when Crabtree was doing prismatic pressure blades and things.
Oh, yeah.
And I learned that Crabtree had published this whole series of articles and that you could buy them out of, Idaho, Pocatello.
Right.
And I remember I ordered every single thing that Don Crabtree had ever published that was for sale.
Uh-huh.
I ordered, and I bet I read those damn things a dozen times each.
Yeah, I wore out my first set, and then I bought it on digital. But I did the same thing. But I'm really dyslexic, so like I would try to start writing something, or I'd do experiments, but my dyslexic was so bad that people thought I was like special needs or something, and I really, besides my professor at college, which was a lithic technologist that studied under boards, his name was Clay Singer. And we would do projects together, but when he was fired from the university for marijuana, and when that happened, it just like I pretty much lost contact with anyone that was willing to work with me, because I don't know. It's just like people wanted like the specific, systematic perfection that I couldn't deliver, But I still appreciate reading other people's stuff. It's like I love it.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I eat it up. It's I try to read everything I can get my hands on, for sure.
So what about the only thing I can think of besides that, I mean, I know a lot of people, not a lot of people, but some people endeavoring in the Danish daggers, Woody Blackwell, who I was talking to Ed Mosier, and he said Woody Blackwell came to him to learn his handles and his stitching. Have you seen Woody Blackwell's daggers?
I have. Yeah, they're awesome. Yeah, Woody is just, the guy is so naturally talented in anything. I mean, there's not enough weeks in Woody's remaining life to tackle all of the world. I mean, he could take on any, I'm convinced of all the flint knappers out there. I mean, I don't care if it's pressure blades, eccentrics, Grzan, daggers, whatever. Woody can unscramble all of it.
Yeah.
Because the guy is such a phenomenal artist.
Well, I've never met him, but I have. I read what he does, and of course I read Woody's Dream that like puts his analytical perspective is really. He's got a clear idea of what the basic item is. Like if it's Clovis or Danish, he has an ability to focus in on what is what the whole perspective of that artifact is before he starts, and then he reverse engineers it. It's like really ingenious how he does those things.
Yeah, no, it really is, and then he knocks out 4 or 5 perfect examples, and he moves on to something else.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty cool. I was looking at a couple images last night of some of his recent stuff, and no, it's darn good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think any of us have gotten it spot on yet. I think some of us are producing stuff that's within the realm of variation that you see archaeologically with the dagger forms, but for the best of the best of the best, I don't think any of us have hit it on yet. I think the work that Ed Moreland's doing is really quite fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a self-taught guy. He saw some of the examples in North American collections and just kind of figured it out.
Yeah. He told me that he figured out he was worried about it and thinking about it and sweating over it, and he says one night he had a dream and it told him exactly how to do it, and it worked.
Yeah, well, yeah, whatever the impetus is. It's interesting. I'm always fascinated, guys like him and Waldorf that sorted it out just from seeing a handful of examples, but I learned and a lot of the Danes did the same that I know, because their knapping tradition is so entrenched in doing square stuff. I mean, kind of the first thing you learn to do over there is blades and square axes. successful dagger production, there's almost no byfacing in the Danish tradition until the dagger period.
Uh-huh.
And so, to this day, I mean, the hobbyist Danish knappers I know spend most of their time working square and making really awesome blades.
Uh-huh.
And, guys like Moreland, they're coming from the exact opposite tradition at D.C. He was doing Hopewell stuff. He was making Snyder's points, and he had the byfacing down pat, but then kind of had to backtrack to learn the techniques associated with doing square stuff and working with a punch.
Right.
And, to their credit, both of them have figured out their own holding positions. Waldorf uses a vise. Moreland does it between his knees, like I do.
Is that Moreland or Mosier?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mosier.
Oh, because I've read stuff from both. I've read both of those guys, so I guess good.
Yeah, no, it's Ed Mosier that I've been referring to.
Because I do know both those guys that I've talked to before. But, so, do you think there was like a cottage industry come to like the gunflint makers, where there's one master and then other people, working in there? How do you think those daggers? Do you think it was like a cottage industry or an individual like master napper doing those things?
Well, I think that's a great question, and there's tons of stuff being written about that. The whole idea about craft specialization showing up in the latter part of the Neolithic. There's an American who named Debbie Olesen, who is a professor at the University of Lund in Sweden. Debbie's lived there, 30 years, and is married to a Swede. That's her whole deal, is trying to sort out the networks for production and what does it look like? Is it one guy? Is it a kind of a little cast of uber primo dagger makers? I'm not sure she's completely sorted it out yet, but I mean, what I can tell you is that if you look at, what you see on the internet are the images of the best of the best. That's what gets shown. For every one beautiful Hindsgavl-ish dagger, there's hundreds of stubby, crude, less accomplished examples. So, I think that by the time bronze daggers are being inspirational templates being traded into Denmark and everybody wants one that looks like it, there's, just like modern watchmaking, there's basic utilitarian stuff that everybody has, and then there's real high status stuff that's being made by a handful of really gifted flint workers. That, every now and then you see a Hindsgavl-like dagger, or at least a handle that is every bit as tight. And, that's clearly beyond the abilities of most utilitarian flint workers.
Right.
But, whether it's organized in a caste system or a mentor system or a la guild system, or a family, I think it's anyone's guess. I think clearly there's a group of a handful of incredibly accomplished craftspeople, men or women, who have mastered the art and are creating the best of the best in terms of status objects that are going to the highest status individuals. But, whether the production is one person doing it start to finish, or if it's a small group where they take turns doing stages, at this point it's anyone's guess, because, there aren't, to my knowledge still, there aren't designated places where, like, workshops for just nothing but dagger producers. They're
right.
scattered around on the landscape. Denmark is an incredible erosional zone where sites get mixed and blended, and if they're doing it, the grinding stages by the coast, those sites get demolished, and maybe some year someone will find a big lithic production area from the latter Neolithic that'll be clearly dagger production, where you can start to sort out some of those questions, but it's still an open issue.
Uh-huh.
I think it's probably a lot like today,
right,
where you get people that are specialists in one area,
mm-hmm.
and they can create virtuoso works that people aspire to, but most of them, they're doing work that is far under what that person's able to do.
Right.
And then once the Stone Age comes to a full close, it never emerges again as time goes on through the Bronze Age and Iron Age and so on. So it just kind of falls into history.
Right. So, not to change the subject too much, but I will. What do you think about this? What do you think about the Sweetwater biface and that super thin biface technology?
Oh, phenomenal! Get virtuoso, some napper that was a virtuoso bifacer that just was able to do work head and shoulders above what any of his or her contemporaries were able to do.
Right.
I mean, there's all kinds of outliers in. I mean, look at some of the, there's a handful of original Mayan eccentrics that are out there that are head and shoulders above what you see on the other Mayan sites. I mean,
right.
there's Zayan knives from Egypt that are, clearly masterworks. For every one of those, there's dozens of ones that are much more sloppy. It's the Woody Blackwell syndrome. I mean,
right.
these people emerge in a generation, and they're just gifted craftspeople who are, able to absolutely push the boundaries and serve as inspiration for others. But a lot of those that aspire to it just aren't ever able to produce similar products. And Sweetwater's probably one.
Right.
Wenatchee's another.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the massive Wenatchee points, the Vencash stuff.
Uh-huh.
I got to handle all of that stuff when I was a grad student. George Prison had it in his office one afternoon, and called me in and let me fondle all of the Vencash. It's mind-blowing stuff done by a virtuoso.
Right.
But but those kinds of nappers are outliers, and they're just incredibly gifted craftspeople that, had the skills and had the rock and had the right day to produce those incredible remnants of their craft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, well, what I'll do is I guess I'll just keep, if you don't mind, maybe like in a couple months, after I get everything send you everything, and then I'll probably have a whole plethora of new questions if you don't mind.
Sure.
And then.
I'm happy to help any way I can, Ray. I really enjoyed talking to you. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's really great.
So,
and not.
There's
not a whole lot of people. Go ahead.
Take note of this. This is my cell phone, which you can reach me on at any time.
Okay.
So stick it in your phone, and give me a buzz anytime, man. I'd really like to talk to you more.
Okay, that's great. Well, I've always had it on my bucket list to get into the Dagger stuff, but then I always get sidetracked by something else. But I can always appreciate other people, and the stages. It's just like the Crabtree law, where you look at the more refined, the less you know. But you guys have been able to figure that out, even with the most refined artifacts. People are figuring it out, and that's fascinating to me.
Yeah, the one thing on my bucket list still is I appreciate fluting. I'm not drawn to it to spend a lot of time at it, but I'm very fascinated with prismatic pressure blades.
Oh yeah, me too.
And that's my next interest. So maybe this winter I'm going to start tinkering indoors with, make myself a chest crutch, and I've read everything there is to see and watched all the videos I can find about how they're done, and I bet I could get good at those.
Yeah.
I'd like to. That's the next thing I want to play with.
Well, it sounds like anything you put your mind to, you're getting done well. So I have no doubt.
It takes time, but that's got my interest for a next project. So, but I'll never give up the Danish stuff. I'm just too married to that.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, because I love your writing and your artifact, your neofacts and everything. It's just love that stuff. I just
yeah. Oh, you bet.
I appreciate you taking your time to talk to me. It's kind of funny because I was talking to one of the newer flint nappers, Jimmy Williams, who's doing the for like over grinding and some Ishi stuff, and he's really a fascinating guy, and he really, he's trying to replicate things that like Jim Hopper and Richard Warren right now, and we talk, and it's just fascinating how, we've gone from replicating artifacts from ancient peoples or proto-historic peoples to now people are replicating modern napper stuff, and it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's a really cool observation. Yeah, it's pretty soon people will start trying to make gray ghosts with the same flake scars as McCormick and Reinhardt.
Yeah, that I actually did go through that stage. I tried to replicate his and other people have too, but replicate his jig, and then replicating his flake scars and his edging, and he went through a change too, where you can tell his early points from his later points, and there's his different techniques and staging, and what his stuff looked like after he met Callahan and Solberg. It changed a little bit, and it's kind of interesting.
Yep.
But
no, I agree.
But I like his early stuff the best, because that's pure Reinhardt,
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, if it looks like a table bench and there's like grind marks to get the stuff he missed in the middle, that's like his classic stuff. So that's what I like the best,
Yeah, me too, Ray.
So that's
well.
interesting.
Listen, man, have a great week, and don't hesitate to give a call. Okay.
I appreciate it, and when it gets farther along, and luckily I have some people working with me that are, really high into the technical part of editing, so it should come out pretty good at the other end.
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing it.
Yeah, I'll definitely get you a copy, and I appreciate it.
Okay, man.
And I'll let you go on your drive.
Great to talk to you. Have a great week.
Yeah, you too. Thanks again.
Okay, Ray.
Okay, have a good one. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye now.